In the name of God, Creator, Redeemer and Sanctifier. Amen. There are times when we read the Gospels when the humanity of the people who followed Jesus absolutely shines through. One of my favourite people is Peter, because Peter often acts impulsively, like leaping out of boats into the water. Actions like that remind me that Jesus didn't call and doesn't call perfect people, but calls real people with real faults just like mine. It can always be too easy to think that the disciples were the ones who, being with Jesus, had all the answers to every situation as well. But we're reminded in the Gospels that at times even they were lost for words. This morning in John's Gospel, we have one of those occasions where we find that Philip is lost for words. In this exchange between Philip and Nathanael, Nathanael is very plain speaking. He reminds me of one of our family's favourite quotes from Thomas the Tank Engine. "I'm a plain-speaking engine. I speak as I find." Philip, however, is consistently throughout the Gospels a person who brings others to Jesus. It's easy to imagine Philip, or to see Philip, as a natural people person who finds it comfortable to share his faith, his experience with others, who's approachable, and so people see something that Philip has and ask to share in it as well. Philip, equally in his enthusiasm, wants to share what he has with others. And so here we have Philip evangelising Nathanael, and Nathanael, plain-speaking Nathanael, is more than a little cynical and sceptical about Philip's newfound enthusiasm for this wandering preacher. Nathanael's response to Philip's certainty about Jesus is certainly one with which we can all identify. It's certainly one with which I can identify. Whether we like it or not, there is usually a place that's often looked down on, that's slurred by others as being seen as not quite right, not quite socially acceptable. For Nathanael, Nazareth was that place. His response, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" is as much a slander on Nazareth as it is saying that God can only act through places that he's determined to be good. Places perhaps Nathanael had invested his hope in other places, places perhaps where Nathanael had been disappointed and thus were not deemed to be good. Perhaps, too, underlying Nathanael's response is an experience in which he may have invested hope in other preachers and been disappointed. Perhaps he was annoyed by Philip's enthusiasm. We don't know. What we do know is that he was unwilling to believe that God could bring anything good out of Nazareth. And Philip, in the face of Nathanael's strong response, is lost for words as to how to respond to this initial negativity. And so he does his best and responds in the best way possible. "Come and see," he says. If that's your attitude, come and see for yourself. Sometimes the only way to have our convictions changed is to go and experience it for ourselves. Hearing someone else might raise our curiosity, but their words can never quite capture the experience for ourselves. There was a time in my life when we moved to a different town. My teenage self felt that we had moved to the end of civilization. The world was coming to an end. I could see the light. My response to moving to this location was like Nathaniel's. Can anything good come out of this place? And certainly on our first drive into that town, I felt vindicated. I obviously had my inbuilt prejudices, and I was not open because of my prejudices and because of my own grief at the time to seeing God working in mysterious ways. It was not until I took Philip's advice and went and saw for myself that my eyes were opened and I saw and experienced God powerfully in that place over many years. Sometimes I think it's tempting for us to fall into the trap that others lay for us, of believing that as Christians we need to have all the answers all the time. Well, where's your answer to that? If you've got no answer, then it can't be true, can it? That we need to know everything to have a response every time someone questions us, we do certain things, or asks why we believe what we believe. And we might find ourselves like Philip, lost for words, though knowing of our own experience that we have indeed found the Messiah. So Philip doesn't leave Nathanael. He tells Nathanael because he wants to share the goodness that he has experienced. And Nathanael doubts him. It would have been easy for Philip, as it would be easy for us sometimes, to at that point go, well, if you're not going to believe me, if you're not going to trust me, if that's what our friendship means to you, then I'm gone. But he doesn't. He doesn't end up having an argument with him in which no one ends up convinced and a friendship is destroyed. He doesn't abandon Nathanael, because if you're not going to believe me, then you're no longer my friend. He does what is the only course available to him. He invites Nathanael to come and see for himself, and then, after experiencing Christ, to make up his own mind. Philip is confident in what he knows and believes about Jesus because of his experience, and he recognises that he has no answer for Nathanael's cynicism, and brings Nathanael into an encounter with Christ. And in that vulnerability, it is the encounter with the living God that convicts Nathanael at last. God knows us more fully than we know ourselves. God knows our inner selves, and just as Jesus named Nathanael as one without deceit or plain speaking, Jesus knows the vulnerability, the prejudices, the barriers which are part of Nathanael's life and which the encounter with the living Christ destroys. And when words fail us, when we can't put into words what we've seen and heard and believe, then God calls us to be like Philip, to invite others to come and see. For it is in this encounter, in vulnerability with the living God, in our openness to the living God, that God fills the places where words fail. So let us come and see. Amen.